Well, after years of riding Harley Davidsons, I have switched over to Indian. So the question I'm considering is, now that I've switched over to Indian, would I ever buy another Harley Davidson? Let me give you a quick walk around of my Indian and then I'll address that question. So here's my Indian Roadmaster. You have to excuse the fact that it's a little dirty. It's got bugs on it. I ride it every day and I love my Indian. So again, when I address the question is, after having switched from Harley Davidson to Indian, would I ever buy another Harley Davidson? It's starting to sprinkle, so you may see a little raindrops on my windshield. So for years I was a Harley loyalist and I've made the switch to Indian. And so my question I'm considering is, would I ever buy another Harley Davidson? Well, let me tell you, I've loved Harley Davidsons all my life. I've loved Harley Davidson since I was a little kid. And I blame that on Evel Knievel. You know, when I was a kid, Evel Knievel was a hero. And of course, much of his career he rode Harley Davidsons. Not at the beginning, but at least later on. So I always wanted a Harley Davidson. Of course, the Yamahas were cheaper, so that's what my parents bought me when I was a kid. But I really wanted the Harley Davidson. I did not buy a Harley until I was, I think, 41. Primarily because I wouldn't pay more than MSRP for one. I remember in around 2000, I went to the local dealership in Tyler, Texas with cash money in my pocket. I had saved and saved and saved, and I was so excited about buying the Harley Davidson. And I went in there and we got to talk about price, and he was quoting me $2 grand more than the MSRP. And told me they had an allotment system. They were only going to get X number of bikes and they were going to sell every one they got, and they would all bring that extra $2 grand. So what did I do? I went down the street and bought another Honda. Well, along about that time, I went to Jefferson, Texas, and there was an Indian dealership there, a brand new Indian dealership. Those Indians are what we would affectionately call Gilroy, California Indians, because they were made in Gilroy, California. Well, I saw that brand new Indian Chief and I thought, man, that is the most beautiful motorcycle I have ever seen. And so I fell in love with Indian about 20 years ago. But I finally got a Harley. I've owned 6 Harley Davidsons. 4 I bought brand new and 2 I bought used. But back in 17 I bought an Indian Chief. Ended up in 2019 buying this Indian Roadmaster. And so the reason I made the switch, there's a lot of rain on my windshield there, I don't know how it's affecting what you're seeing, but the reason I made the switch, 4 basic things. One is style. The Indians I think are beautiful. Another one is comfort, and comfort is huge. For me, you know, if you're going to ride long miles, you don't want to be beat up at the end of the day. And I can tell you, hands down, this Indian Roadmaster is way more comfortable than the 2019 Street Glide that I purchased brand new. And it really had to do with the rear shocks, and I'll come back to that. But style, comfort, features, you'd have to buy a Harley CVO to get the features that came on my Indian Roadmaster. And you buy the Harley CVO Limited, you're looking at an extra 10 grand or so. And there's some features on this Indian you cannot get on the Harley, like the electric windshield primarily. So style, comfort, features, and performance. Now I have to give it to the Milwaukee 8 motor. It is a good solid motor. Performance wise, it's comparable to this Indian 111. So it's not that much difference in performance. So I've made the switch. I only have an Indian. For a while I had 2, and I had my Indian Chief. I also had a Harley Road Glide. Well, now I just have the Indian Roadmaster. And so my question is, would I ever buy another Harley Davidson? And the answer is yeah, I would. I mean, I still love Harley Davidsons. They're cool bikes. They have some things going for them as well. The dealer network and part supply and so on. So I would most definitely buy another Harley Davidson at some point. As a matter of fact, I kind of a Harley Electric Glide Standard. Of course, that's kind of the opposite of my Roadmaster. My Roadmaster came loaded with features. The Electric Glide Standard is the stripped down model. It doesn't even have a radio. I mean, it has the fairing and hard bags, but that's about it. And if I bought the Electric Glide Standard, I know at some point I'd have to spend about $1,000 upgrading the rear shocks, because the Electric Glide Standard comes with the short shocks that the Street Glide and the Road Glide come with. Now, if you buy the Limited, well, then you'll get the taller shocks and the better rear suspension. Actually, the Limited, the suspension is much closer to the Indian, but the Indian still outshines even the Limited when it comes to suspension. So I would buy another Harley Davidson as a second bike. I really wouldn't want it as my only motorcycle because of the reasons I've already mentioned. And if I had both the Indian and the Harley and I needed to sell one, the Harley would be the one I would sell. I would keep the Indian. I mean, like I said, I've made the switch. I love the Indian. That doesn't mean I dislike Harleys. I wouldn't mind having a Harley Davidson. If you're a Harley loyalist and you just love Harley Davidsons and you wouldn't consider another brand, buy the Harley. You'll be happy with the Harley. There's nothing wrong with Harley Davidsons. But if you would consider another brand, you give Indian a test drive and you'll see what I'm talking about with the comfort and the features. Now, style, that's all a personal preference. I love the look of the Indian. Some people may not. Of course, there's different variations. The Indian now you can get like mine with the full fender. You can get it with the open fender. They have two different batwing fairings, and of course now they have the new Indian Challenger. Now, when I talked about performance earlier, that twin cam versus my Thunderstroke, they're pretty comparable. My understanding is that new Indian Challenger, that liquid cooled power cruiser or power bagger, will run off and leave the twin cam 107. At least on the drag race videos you see on YouTube, that's the case. So they're both great motorcycles. I've enjoyed every Harley Davidson I've ever owned. I've owned now 2 Indians. I've owned several Yamahas, several Hondas, 1 Kawasaki, and I've loved all of them. They've all been great bikes, but my 2 preferred brands are Indian and Harley Davidson in that order. Again, right now Indian is my preferred brand, and I really do not at all regret making the switch. So if you ride as much as you can, because one day we'll all be too old to ride.